Thank you, Mr. Hegseth. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Hegseth, thank you. Thank you for your service. So if you're confirmed as Secretary of Defense, you will oversee our military, including about 250,000 women who currently serve on active duty in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Space Forces, and the Marines. And I have serious concerns that your behavior toward women disqualifies you from serving in this role. Now, I've been trying to get answers from you for quite some time on this. You haven't wanted to meet or to answer any of my questions, so we'll just have to do it here and dive in. I want to pick up on some of the questions asked by Senators Shaheen and Gillibrand and Hirono, and I just want to make sure we have a list of some of the facts that I think are undisputed. I'm not going to talk about anonymous sources. I'm just going to quote you directly. We've got the video. We've got it in print. So going back to January 2013, you told a Fox News interviewer that women in the military simply couldn't measure up to men in the military, saying that allowing women to serve in combat roles would force the military to lower the bar. You picked up on that same theme in 2015, making remarks on Fox News, referring to women in combat as, quote, it would erode standards. June 2024, you said on Ben Shapiro's podcast, quote, women shouldn't be in combat at all. And then, of course,
in 2015, while discussing the role of women in the armed forces, he stated that allowing women into combat would erode standards, implying that the quality and effectiveness of the military would suffer from their inclusion. His argument wasn't presented with qualifications, such as physical benchmarks or specific roles. He broadly opposed the idea of women in combat, presenting it as a threat to military readiness and cohesion. This wasn't a passing opinion, it became a repeated theme. His statements in 2024 further cemented his position. During an appearance on Ben Shapiro's podcast, Mr. Hegseth clearly stated, women shouldn't be in combat at all. This comment wasn't phrased as a concern or part of a larger debate. It was delivered as a categorical statement, making it clear that he did not believe women belonged in these roles under any circumstances. Moreover, these views weren't just expressed in interviews or in formal commentary. They appeared in his published writing. In his 2024 book, he stated plainly on page 26 that while the nation needs moms, it doesn't need them in the military, especially in combat units. Later, on page 48, he wrote that women should not be placed in combat because they distract male soldiers. These remarks are not only dismissive, but suggest that women's mere presence weakens the focus and performance of men in combat. This line of thinking doesn't consider the discipline or professionalism expected from all soldiers, regardless of gender, and instead places the burden of distraction on women.
So help me understand, Mr. Hegseth, what extraordinary event happened in that 32-day period that made you change the core values you had expressed for the preceding 12 years?
Senator, again, I very much appreciate you bringing up my comments from 2013 because for me, this issue has always been about standards. And unfortunately, because of some of the people that have been in political power for the last 4 years, priorities other than...
These weren't vague or nuanced opinions. They were firm declarations made in public forums, on news programs, in podcasts, and in his own published book. Statements like women shouldn't be in combat at all, and we need moms, but not in the military, especially not in combat units, left no room for misinterpretation. This was a belief system rooted in a world view that gender inherently disqualified someone from serving in the most intense and dangerous areas of military life. However, only 32 days after his last public statement affirming that belief, Mr. Hegseth dramatically changed his tone. Suddenly, he was quoted saying that some of our greatest warriors are women, and he expressed support for their service in combat. This change did not come gradually, nor was it accompanied by any explanation, personal experience, or event that could justify such a dramatic turnaround. What did happen within those 32 days was a nomination from President Donald Trump to serve as Secretary of Defense, a position of enormous influence and responsibility. This close timing between his nomination and his reversal in opinion makes it difficult to avoid the appearance of political convenience. People naturally change and grow, especially when presented with new evidence, but this shift happened too quickly and too cleanly to appear sincere. It gives the impression of a nomination conversion, a term used by critics to suggest that his sudden embrace of women in combat is driven not by genuine belief, but by the need to survive a Senate confirmation process where such views would be deeply unpopular and disqualifying. This perceived opportunism has real consequences. The women currently serving in combat roles, who have trained, sacrificed, and served with honor, may now feel that their leader does not truly respect or believe in their abilities. They may worry that once confirmed, Mr. Hegseth could revert back to his original beliefs, potentially impacting policy decisions, promotion opportunities, or even morale within the ranks. Moreover, the public and the Senate are left with serious concerns about credibility. When someone holds a deeply entrenched view for over a decade and then discards it without any transparent reasoning, it becomes difficult to take their new position at face value. There is no record of a personal transformation, no instance of dialogue with female combat veterans, no shift due to research or a specific experience, just a change in rhetoric at the moment when political ambition required it. This pattern casts a shadow over Mr. Hegseth's judgment and raises broader questions about whether his values are grounded in principle or shaped by expedience. For a role as consequential as Secretary of Defense, such uncertainty is deeply troubling.
Now, Mr. Hegseth, you have written that after they retire, generals should be banned from working for the defense industry for 10 years. You and I agree on the corrosive effects of the revolving door between the Pentagon and defense contractors. It's something I would have liked to talk with you about if you'd come and been willing to visit with me. But the question I have for you on this is, will you put your money where your mouth is and agree that when you leave this job, you will not work for the defense industry for 10 years?
However, when asked directly during his confirmation hearing if he would be willing to make the same commitment for himself, should he leave the position of Secretary of Defense in the future, his response was far less definitive. Instead of offering a firm yes or no, he deflected the question by stating that he would consult with the president on what the policy should be. This evasive answer stands in stark contrast to his earlier, more assertive rhetoric on the issue when applied to others. It sends a troubling message. What he believes is ethical and necessary for generals may not apply to him if he holds a civilian leadership position at the Department of Defense. This inconsistency creates a credibility gap. On one hand, he advocates for reform and accountability, acknowledging the damaging effects of the revolving door practice. On the other, when faced with the opportunity to lead by example and commit to the very policy he supports, he avoids taking a personal stand. His refusal to pledge suggests either a lack of conviction or a willingness to leave the door open for future personal gain, neither of which inspires public confidence. The stakes here are not just theoretical. The Department of Defense manages hundreds of billions of dollars in defense contracts. Its decisions have far-reaching consequences, not just for military operations, but for public spending, private industry influence, and national security. When a defense official is perceived as keeping one eye on a future role in the private sector, it undermines the impartiality and focus required to make decisions purely in the national interest. That's why ethical commitments like the one Mr. Hegseth was asked to make matter so deeply. The concern is compounded by the fact that, if confirmed, Mr. Hegseth would not be a general subject to oversight. He would be the top civilian leader of the military, setting the tone for everyone else. If he is unwilling to apply the same standards to himself that he demands of others, it calls into question his leadership principles. This isn't simply a matter of personal ethics. It touches on the core trust that military personnel and the public must have in the Department of Defense. Without that trust, morale, transparency, and decision-making integrity can all suffer. In a role as powerful as Secretary of Defense, any signs of ethical inconsistency are not just concerning. They are dangerous.